The first time I realized just how cruel words could be wasn't in school or on some random street. It was at a family gathering, one of those events that is supposed to be about laughter, love, and connection. But for me, it became a stage for public humiliation. And the person orchestrating it? My brother-in-law, Kevin. Kevin had a way of making everyone feel small without ever raising his voice. He had charm, wit, and the ability to plant a seed of doubt about someone, then water it with subtle digs and sarcastic laughter. That night, he set his sights on me. As soon as I walked in, he was there, dressed perfectly, his hair slicked back, a smirk that never quite left his face. "Oh, look who decided to show up," he said, loud enough for the family to hear. "I almost didn't recognize you without your, well, nothing really." His laugh was sharp, precise, the kind that doesn't just land in the room but sinks into your chest like a punch. I froze for a second, trying to summon my usual calm. I had learned not to respond to Kevin in front of an audience. He thrived on it. Still, I felt my face heat up, my chest tighten. Around me, relatives chuckled nervously, some glancing at me with pity, others unsure how to react. He continued, "A perfect performance of superiority. I hear you've been working really hard at being mediocre." He paused for effect. "Honestly, I don't know how anyone can take you seriously. A nobody in the making, I'd say." And just like that, the words settled over the room, heavy and suffocating. For a moment, I wanted to disappear. I wanted the floor to swallow me whole. But there was something in me that refused to give him the satisfaction. I forced a smile, nodded politely, and moved past him toward the dining table, letting him enjoy the illusion of victory. Kevin didn't need to raise his voice. His reputation in the family was enough. He had the power to frame narratives. And that night, he framed me as insignificant, weak, and unworthy. Every whispered remark, every pointed joke was carefully calculated. By the end of dinner, everyone had an opinion about me, none of them flattering. And I left that night with a knot in my stomach and a determination in my heart. The humiliation didn't end with the gathering. The whispers followed me home, the subtle snickers in family group chat, even casual comments at later events, they all reinforced Kevin's story. I wasn't just being judged, I was being written into a role I didn't belong to. The family's nobody. But here, as the thing about being underestimated, it can either crush you or ignite something inside. I chose the latter. That night, sitting in my small apartment with nothing but the hum of the refrigerator and the dim light of a single lamp, I started planning. I couldn't control Kevin. I couldn't change what he had said, but I could control my next, and I would make them count. I pulled out a notebook and started listing every skill I had, every opportunity I could pursue, every avenue where I could prove my worth, not to Kevin, not even to my family, but to myself. The world didn't need to validate me. I would create my own validation, one brick at a time. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew the road ahead would be long and grueling, but I also knew something Kevin could never take away: my drive, my vision, and the fire burning quietly inside me. I made a vow in the quiet of that night. Someday, everyone, including Kevin, would see me for what I truly was, and not for the narrative he had spun. The very next day, I started taking action. I reached out to mentors, began learning new skills, and researched opportunities in my field. I took on extra projects, even unpaid ones, to build experience. I studied successful entrepreneurs, innovators, and public figures, anyone who had turned public doubt into recognition. I wanted to understand their strategies, their mindset, their discipline. Kevin's voice, the laughter at the family gathering, wasn't a motivator rooted in anger or revenge. It was a fuel for focus. Every time I felt doubt creeping in, I remembered his words. I let them sharpen my concentration, refine my ambition, and remind me of the importance of proving value through results rather than arguments. Months went by. I built small wins, quietly, away from the spotlight. A freelance project here, a networking connection there, slowly building a portfolio of credibility. It wasn't flashy, and no one noticed yet, but the foundation was being laid. And with every step, The vision of the day I would rise above Kevin's judgment became clearer. I didn't want revenge in the petty sense. I wanted proof that effort, persistence, and ingenuity could speak louder than rumors and gossip. And I wanted the world, including Kevin, to see it when the time was right. That's the thing about underestimation. It is temporary. The narrative Kevin tried to impose could only last as long as I allowed it. Every late night, every challenge overcome, every skill learned was a small step toward rewriting that narrative, and I had no intention of stopping. The countdown to my revelation had begun, not in days or weeks, but in years of silent, relentless work. And when the world finally saw my face, when the news broadcasted my story, Kevin's words would no longer define me. My success would speak for itself, louder than any whisper or smirk could. And so, the journey started not with anger, not with confrontation, but with a quiet, burning determination to create a life that even Kevin couldn't dismiss. A life that would turn the judgment of a family gathering into a distant memory, and my face into a symbol of perseverance, ambition, and undeniable impact. After that fateful family gathering, my life entered a different rhythm, a rhythm dictated not by social gatherings or idle chatter, but by determination and purpose. Kevin's words had stung, yes, but they had also ignited something I couldn't ignore. That humiliation became my fuel. I decided, then and there, that I wouldn't waste energy on anger or resentment. I would channel every ounce of frustration into creating something undeniable, something that couldn't be whispered away or laughed off. I started by taking stock of my life. My day job was a modest administrative work in a small marketing firm, but it paid the bills. It didn't excite me, but it gave me stability while I mapped out my plan. Every evening, I dedicated at least 3 hours to self-improvement. I read books on business, personal branding, and public speaking. I devoured articles on entrepreneurship, case studies of people who had started from nothing and built empires. The more I learned, the more I realized how little I knew, but also how much potential I had if I was willing to commit fully. The weekends became sacred. While friends went out, I built. I created spreadsheets to track my progress. I designed prototypes for projects I dreamed about. I reached out to mentors, even strangers, asking for advice and guidance. Some dismissed me, others ignored my emails, but a few responded, and I treasured those interactions. Each conversation was a stepping stone, a piece of the foundation I was quietly building. Money was tight. I had to make sacrifices. I gave up dining out, new clothes, and almost every comfort I had enjoyed before. Every penny went into learning, investing, or funding my small experiments. Some nights, I walked past the local cafe, the one Kevin often flaunted as a symbol of his own success, and I'd smile to myself. While he spent money to maintain an image, I spent it to build substance. Substance that would, one day, speak louder than his smirk ever could. Sleep became a luxury. I would wake up before sunrise to study, spend the day at my job, and work on my projects late into the night. My apartment grew cluttered with books, notebooks filled with ideas, and sketches of concepts that, at the time, felt almost impossible. But every late night, every hour of exhaustion, reminded me of my purpose. I wasn't working for recognition, yet I was working to create recognition that couldn't be ignored. There were setbacks, plenty of them. A potential investor would reject my pitch, citing lack of experience. A prototype would fail, the data refusing to cooperate. I questioned myself often, wondering if I was biting off more than I could chew. But every time I felt doubt, I remembered Kevin. I remembered the condescending laughter, the dismissive glances, the way he had made me feel small in front of everyone I cared about. Those memories weren't chains, they were wings, pushing me higher with every failure I survived. I also had to navigate family gatherings with care. Kevin never let me forget that night, and he subtly tried to measure my progress or lack thereof in every conversation. But I kept my victories private. No brags, no announcements. He had underestimated me once, and I had no intention of giving him a stage again. The work was mine. The growth was mine, and the eventual recognition would arrive on my terms. After months of relentless effort, small wins started to appear. A freelance project here, a contract there. Each success was a validation, a small proof that my skills and ideas had value. It wasn't flashy, but it was tangible. And with every step forward, my confidence began to grow, not arrogance, but the quiet certainty that I was on the right path. I also invested time in building connections. Networking wasn't about charm or flattery, it was about authenticity. I reached out to professionals I admired, asking questions, seeking mentorship, and learning from their experiences. Some doors opened, others remained closed, but every interaction was a lesson in resilience and strategy. By the end of the first year, I had built a small portfolio of successful projects and gained recognition in local circles. I knew this was just the beginning. Kevin's shadow still lingered, but instead of fearing it, I used it as a reference point. His judgment had once defined me in my family's eyes, but now it served as a compass, showing me the difference between perception and reality, between ego and achievement. I began drafting the blueprint for something larger, a project that could make waves beyond my immediate circles. I called it my Revelation Project, not because it was about proving Kevin wrong, but because it was about proving to myself that diligence, intelligence, and persistence could create undeniable impact. I wanted it to be so significant, so visible, that no one could dismiss the work, the journey, or the transformation. The next 2 years were a blur of focus and sacrifice. I worked on my projects by day, honed my skills by night, and never let the comfort of mediocrity tempt me. I became fluent in business strategy, marketing, and communication. I learned to anticipate challenges before they arose, to adapt, and to innovate. And slowly, the foundations of my future success began to take shape, not in public, but in the quiet, relentless grind of preparation. I had transformed humiliation into determination. I had transformed doubt into strategy. Kevin's words, once sharp and cutting, became fuel. Every time I faced a challenge, every time I felt exhaustion creep in, I remembered the feeling of invisibility he had imposed on me, and I pushed harder. The fire inside me wasn't just ambition, it was vindication by excellence. And then, finally, the first glimpse of opportunity appeared. A local media outlet announced a call for stories of innovation and entrepreneurship. My project, my hard work, my countless hours of preparation, it was ready. I would get my first chance to step into the light and show the world, without pretense or ego, what I had built. And when that moment arrived, Kevin's whispers and smirks would no longer matter, they would be drowned out by undeniable results. This was the quiet grind, unseen, relentless, and transformative. And it was only the beginning. The day I got the call, I was sitting at my small desk, buried in spreadsheets and project notes. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing across the screen. For a moment, I hesitated. Cold calls had often been scams or rejections dressed as opportunities, but something in me whispered that this was different. "Hello, this is Alex Carter," I said cautiously. "Alex Carter?" A bright, enthusiastic voice replied. "Hi, this is Samantha Lewis from City News. We're rerunning a segment on emerging innovators in our community, and your project came highly recommended. We'd love to feature you." I froze. I blinked, thinking I must have misheard. I'm sorry. Could you repeat that?" "Of course," Samantha laughed warmly. "We re-highlighting people making a difference in local business innovation. Your portfolio, your startup, everything we've seen is remarkable. Would you be available for a short interview tomorrow?" I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time, my heart pounding in disbelief. This was the first real acknowledgement of my work, the first time my efforts were recognized outside my small circle of colleagues and mentors. The same work Kevin had tried to dismiss as insignificant was about to be broadcast to the city. Sleep didn't come that night. Instead, I meticulously prepared. I reviewed every detail of my project, rehearsed how to explain my vision clearly, and anticipated every question a reporter might ask. I wasn't just preparing for an interview, I was preparing for a public declaration of who I had become, a tangible demonstration that the nobody Kevin had mocked now had a face, a voice, and a record of accomplishment. The next day, I arrived at the city news studio early. My nerves were sharp but controlled. I wore a simple, clean suit, not flashy, not designed to impress anyone with money, but to project competence and confidence. I wanted my work to speak louder than appearances. The interview began, and for 30 minutes, I explained my journey, the struggles of building credibility from scratch, the relentless hours of study and practice, and the projects that had started to make a real impact. I shared my vision of creating opportunities, not just for myself, but for others in my community who were overlooked, underestimated, or dismissed. I spoke honestly about the challenges and setbacks, about the moments when doubt almost paralyzed me, and about the persistent determination that had kept me moving forward. The crew seemed genuinely captivated. When they asked about my motivations, I spoke candidly. Some people try to define you by what you don't have, by what others think of you. Ivy learned that the only opinion that truly matters is your own. If you invest in yourself, in your skills, in your vision, the rest will follow. After the interview, the producer smiled and shook my hand. You're going to inspire a lot of people with this story, Alex. This is exactly what our audience needs to hear. I left the studio walking on a cloud, the weight of years of struggle and planning suddenly transforming into validation. For the first time, my story was out there, no filters, no distortions, just the truth of my hard work and perseverance, and I couldn't wait to see the impact. Later that evening, the segment aired. I was watching nervously in my apartment, my laptop perched on the kitchen counter. The familiar hum of the refrigerator, once a background noise to my late-night work, now seemed like an audience waiting with me. And then I saw myself on the screen. The camera panned across my workspace, showing the clutter of notes, sketches, and projects that had defined my grind. The voiceover highlighted my dedication, the innovative solutions I had created, and the growing influence I was starting to have in the local business community. Then the camera focused on me as I spoke, and my words carried beyond the studio, into living rooms, offices, and cafes across the city. I held my breath as the segment closed with a shot of my smiling face, and in that moment, a strange thing happened. A mixture of relief, pride, and anticipation surged through me. The recognition I had longed for wasn't just personal anymore, it was public, and it was powerful. Almost immediately, the response was overwhelming. Emails flooded in from people I had never met, entrepreneurs, mentors, local media, and even strangers reaching out to express admiration and curiosity. Social media posts began circulating, tagging my work and my project. It was surreal to see the seeds I had planted in isolation now blossoming across the city. And then came the calls from family members who had been silent or dismissive before. Some congratulated me, tentatively, as if afraid they were intruding. Others were shocked, almost speechless. And Kevin? Well, Kevin was quiet, too quiet. I knew the segment had reached him almost immediately. I imagined him in disbelief, trying to dismiss what he had just seen, unable to reconcile the nobody he had publicly declared with the success now broadcast across screens and social media. I didn't gloat. I didn't send messages or make public displays aimed at Kevin. The recognition was not about him. It was about the validation of effort, persistence, and resilience. But inside, I allowed myself a private satisfaction. The same man who had tried to define my worth had no choice but to confront the reality of my achievements. Over the next few weeks, the momentum continued. I was invited to speak at local events, featured in business publications, and approached by investors who wanted to collaborate on larger projects. Every opportunity was a chance to expand, to grow, to prove that the story Kevin had spun about me was not just inaccurate, it was laughably wrong. And yet, despite the recognition, I remained grounded. I remembered the months and years of work behind every small success, the sacrifices, the late nights, and the countless moments when failure seemed inevitable. I had learned that visibility was fleeting without substance, and my focus stayed on building real, lasting impact. But one night, as I scrolled through comments on the news segment, I saw a familiar name, Kevin, and beside it, a simple, stunned message. I had no idea. You've become someone else entirely. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The message, like everything else that night, spoke louder than words. It wasn't a public shaming or argument, it was recognition, involuntary and undeniable. Kevin had finally seen me not as the nobody he had labeled, but as a force, a presence, a person who had turned every insult, every whisper, into a narrative of achievement. That night, I realized something crucial. Public recognition was a powerful tool, but it was also a responsibility. The spotlight, though sudden, was not an end, it was a beginning. The people who now looked to me for inspiration were counting on authenticity, integrity, and the demonstration that real success comes from persistence, not privilege. And so, I embraced the challenge. I continued to innovate, to build, and to grow. The grind had not ended. It had merely shifted to a higher stage. Kevin's judgment had set me on this path, but now, the world was watching, and I intended to show them exactly what relentless effort could achieve. The momentum from the news segment didn't fade, it accelerated. Suddenly, every project I touched carried weight, and doors that had been closed for years started opening effortlessly. I realized that recognition was not just validation, it was leverage. But I also knew that influence without substance was fleeting. I had to build something real, something tangible, something that couldn't be ignored or dismissed. I began by scaling up my projects strategically. Freelance clients became long-term partners. Local businesses that had once barely noticed my efforts now sought my advice, trusting my insights and methodology. The trust I built was not superficial. It was earned through result. Each success compounded the next, like bricks stacking to form an unstoppable wall. One of my first major moves was launching a startup consultancy focused on helping overlooked entrepreneurs turn their ideas into profitable ventures. I called it Catalyst Solutions. The name symbolized what I intended to do: ignite growth, spark transformation, and create a ripple effect that extended far beyond my own project. The consultancy required capital, so I reinvested every penny I had earned from freelance work and small projects. I moved into a modest office downtown, hired a small but skilled team, and spent months building the infrastructure for a business that could scale efficiently. My approach was methodical: research every potential client meticulously, understand their pain points, and design custom strategies that delivered measurable results. Within a year, Catalyst Solutions had a steady stream of high-profile clients. Restaurants, retail stores, tech startups all sought my expertise. What fascinated me most was the difference between the work I was doing now and the rejection I faced years ago. Kevin's whispers and dismissals had once made me feel invisible. Now, the very people who had ignored me were coming to me, seeking insight and guidance. I couldn't help but feel a quiet satisfaction in that reversal, but I remained focused, knowing that true success required more than just validation. During this period, I also made sure to maintain visibility. Public speaking engagements, guest articles, and collaborations with local media helped establish my authority. I wasn't chasing fame, I was building credibility. Recognition brought influence, influence brought opportunity, and opportunity allowed me to expand my reach in ways I had only dreamed of during those long nights of preparation. And then came the turning point, the first opportunity to confront the past, not with anger, but with undeniable proof of what I had become. Kevin, of course, remained in the periphery. I knew he had seen my news segment, and I had no doubt he followed my progress quietly. But I didn't plan to engage him prematurely. I was building something larger, something that would make the eventual encounter unavoidable. It came in the form of a high-profile community gala, an annual event attended by business leaders, media personalities, and influential figures. Kevin, as usual, attended, always keen to be seen as a person of authority and success. And this year, I was not just attending. I was a keynote speaker, invited to present my work and insights to the city's top mind. I arrived early, as usual, to prepare. The grand ballroom sparkled with chandeliers, the air buzzing with conversation and the hum of ambition. I walked past familiar faces who had once overlooked me, past acquaintances who had doubted my potential, past colleagues who had dismissed my ideas. I didn't feel arrogance or vindictiveness. I felt focus. I was here to demonstrate excellence, not to punish anyone. Excellence, after all, speaks for itself. When the time came, I stepped onto the stage. Lights bathed the podium, and hundreds of eyes turned toward me. I spoke clearly, passionately, and with a confidence that only years of preparation could cultivate. I shared stories of challenges overcome, strategies implemented, and measurable successes achieved. I spoke not just about my journey, but about the potential in every overlooked person, every underestimated idea, every silent effort that had gone unnoticed. The audience was captivated. Applause followed every significant point. Questions poured in afterward, and I answered each with precision and authority. By the end of the night, Catalyst Solutions was the subject of every conversation in the room. My influence was no longer theoretical, it was tangible. I had transformed recognition into authority, and authority into opportunity. And then I saw him. Kevin, sitting with his usual entourage, eyes wide, jaw tight, posture rigid. He tried to mask it, to smile politely, but there was no hiding the shock. The same man who had belittled me, dismissed me, and spread rumors about my worth now sat in stunned silence, watching me command a room that he once assumed I could never enter. I didn't approach him that night. The stage had already spoken. The data, the clients, the respect, they were louder than anything I could say. But I knew the moment would come when he couldn't ignore me any longer. And when it did, I would meet it with the calm certainty of someone who had built everything from scratch while he had relied on inherited confidence. In the months that followed, Catalyst Solutions expanded rapidly. I took on larger clients, negotiated multi-year contracts, and built a team of exceptional talent. We weren't just a consultancy. We were a force in the local business ecosystem, shaping strategies and transforming companies. Kevin's influence faded as my own grew. No words could undo the momentum that years of effort had created. And then came the news that would seal the transformation. A national media outlet wanted to feature my story, a detailed profile on how a nobody became a respected figure in business and innovation. The piece would highlight not only my professional achievements, but also the personal journey, the rejection, the humiliation, and the relentless grind that had transformed my life. When the article published, my face and name were everywhere. Social media exploded with shares and comments, each one a testament to the power of resilience and strategy. And in the midst of that attention, Kevin appeared again, not in person, but through a friend who called to relay his reaction. He's everywhere. I don't know how this happened. I thought he was nothing. I smiled, quietly, to myself. This was not about revenge in the petty sense. This was about transformation, about demonstrating that anyone underestimated can rise, not by tearing others down, but by building something undeniable. Kevin's disbelief was merely a confirmation that my strategy had worked. I had built an empire, quietly, methodically, relentlessly. Recognition had become authority. Authority had become influence. And influence had created opportunities I had once only dreamed of. The nobody label had long since been obliterated, replaced by a presence that could not be ignored, a legacy in the making. And yet, I knew the story wasn't complete. Recognition was powerful, but confrontation, true confrontation, would come when I could show Kevin, publicly and unmistakably, that every word he had ever said about me was not only wrong, but irrelevant. The stage was set, the pieces were in place, and the final act, the ultimate moment of vindication, was waiting. The day of the gala was unlike anything I had experienced before. It wasn't just another event, it was the stage for a reckoning. Months of careful planning, years of relentless effort, and countless sleepless nights had all led to this moment. Kevin had no idea how visible I had become, how powerful my presence had grown. and tonight, he would finally see the full scope of it. I arrived at the venue early, not because I needed to prepare, but because I wanted to witness it unfold from the very beginning. The grand hall was buzzing with chatter, the familiar mix of ambition, networking, and social posturing that defined these events. But my focus wasn't the crowd, it was Kevin. I scanned the room and spotted him immediately. He hadn't changed much physically, still neatly dressed, still wearing that smug, confident air that had once intimidated me. But now, that air was tinged with curiosity, a trace of apprehension, and maybe even a hint of fear. The event began, and speakers took the stage, each delivering their carefully rehearsed messages. But the anticipation in my chest was growing. I knew what was coming the moment when the narrative of nobody would collide with the reality of who I had become. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the podium with calm assurance, every step deliberate, every movement controlled. The room quieted as the audience turned toward me. I began speaking, first sharing the achievements and progress of my consultancy, the transformative project, and the measurable success stories that had captured the city's attention. My words were met with nods, murmurs of approval, and polite applause. Then I shifted the narrative. I began to share my personal journey, the rejection, the humiliation, and the ridicule I had endured. I spoke of Kevin, not by name initially, but of the people who had dismissed me, labeled me as nobody, and spread whispers meant to undermine my confidence. I detailed the challenges I faced, the sacrifices I made, and the relentless effort that had transformed my life. The audience listened in rapt silence. Every word was measured, every anecdote a brick in the foundation of my authority. And then, I paused. My gaze swept across the room, finally landing on Kevin. The room seemed to tighten around him, almost instinctively recognizing that the story was no longer abstract, it was personal, direct, undeniable. Some of you may know the feeling, I continued, my voice calm but resonant. When someone you trust or someone close to you labels you as worthless, as insignificant, as a person who will never achieve anything. When the people around you whisper behind your back, convincing you that your dreams are too big, your efforts too small, your potential too limited. I know that feeling intimately. At that moment, Kevin shifted in his seat. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin line. He knew I was speaking to him, about him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. But here's the thing about labels, I said, my voice steady and authoritative. They mean nothing if you are willing to define yourself differently, if you are willing to work, sacrifice, and persist, if you are willing to transform criticism into fuel and rejection into opportunity. Labels lose their power, and results speak louder than words ever could. I let my gaze linger on him for a few seconds longer than necessary. Kevin's composure cracked. A faint blush of realization and disbelief spread across his face. He recognized that the man standing before him, the confident, successful, respected figure commanding the room, was the same person he had attempted to belittle years ago. I shifted topics seamlessly, detailing my consultancy's recent expansion, the high-profile clients, and the awards and recognition I had garnered. Each achievement was not just a testament to my skill, but a direct contradiction of Kevin's narrative. The room applauded, nodding, murmuring in acknowledgement of the undeniable transformation. And then came the final blow, the most personal moment of confrontation. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle. There is one person here tonight who knows the full story of my journey, I said, my tone calm but commanding. He knows exactly who I was told I couldn't be. He knows the whispers, the doubts, the moments of humiliation, and yet, here I stand, not defined by his word, not limited by his perception, but empowered by my own determination. Kevin's jaw tightened. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on me, as if trying to comprehend the full reality of what he had done and the consequences of his arrogance. The room seemed to sense the tension, the clash of past and present, of judgment and vindication. I didn't need to say his name. He knew exactly who I was speaking about. and that was enough. The impact was instantaneous. The whispers among the audience confirmed it. People were aware, witnessing a transformation so complete it could not be ignored. Kevin's influence, once overbearing, was now entirely eclipsed by my achievement. After my speech, the applause was thunderous. I received accolades, handshakes, and congratulations from every corner of the room. But I didn't seek validation in their reactions. I had already claimed my victory. My triumph wasn't in their recognition, it was in my own perseverance, in my ability to rise above the doubt, the judgment, and the whispers that had once threatened to define me. Later that evening, Kevin approached, trying to maintain composure. "Alex," he began, his voice low and hesitant, almost unsure how to address the man who had once been dismissed. I looked at him calmly. "Hello," I replied. No anger, no gloating, just the quiet confidence of someone who had built everything from scratch. He swallowed hard. I didn't realize, I didn't think. I interrupted gently. "You didn't believe in me. You doubted me. You told others I was a nobody. That's your past. My present speaks for itself." He nodded slowly, a mix of shame and awe in his eyes. He had no words left, and he didn't need them. The transformation was clear. The proof was everywhere in my accomplishments, my influence, and the respect I now commanded. I left the gala that night with a sense of closure. Kevin's whispers no longer held power over me. The story he had tried to shape about my worth had been rewritten by years of relentless effort and unshakable determination. I had confronted the past, not with anger or vindictiveness, but with achievement and presence. And in that confrontation, I realized the ultimate truth. Power is not in labels, gossip, or superficial judgments. Power is in building, in transforming, in creating results that are impossible to ignore. Kevin had tried to define me, but I had redefined myself. And in doing so, I had not only silenced doubt, but I had also shown the world and myself the full scope of my potential. The days following the gala were surreal. Messages, calls, and invitations poured in from people who once ignored me or doubted my potential. The recognition I had long chased it wasn't fleeting validation anymore. It was a permanent shift in how the world perceived me. Kevin's whispers had long since lost their power, replaced by headlines, features, and tangible achievements that demanded respect. But with recognition came responsibility. I knew that influence without impact was hollow. I could have rested on my laurels, celebrated the humiliation I had overcome, or even quietly enjoyed the discomfort of those who had doubted me. But that was not the goal. I wanted to transform the narrative completely, not just my own story, but the story of what it meant to rise above. I expanded Catalyst Solutions into a full-scale consultancy and mentorship organization. We created programs specifically aimed at overlooked and underestimated talent people whose voices had been silenced by doubt, bias, or circumstance. My goal was to ensure that no one ever felt like a nobody because of someone else's judgment. Every success story from that initiative became a testament to the power of perseverance, education, and strategy. Kevin's presence faded into the background. He remained a cautionary figure in my mind, a reminder of the people who underestimate the quiet ones, the diligent ones, the patient ones. I didn't need revenge, his disbelief was enough. I had rewritten the story, and in doing so, I had set an example for countless others. One morning, a major national network reached out to me. They wanted to feature my journey in a full-length documentary, a deep dive into my life, my struggles, and the path from being dismissed as a nobody to becoming a recognized leader. I agreed, but this time I insisted on one thing. The focus would not be on vengeance or humiliation, but on transformation, perseverance, and impact. Filming began, and I recounted everything: the heartbreak of being belittled, the sting of Kevin's words, the sleepless nights, the relentless work, and the ultimate public vindication. But I also emphasized the philosophy that had guided me. Success is measured not by how others treat you, but by what you build with your own hands, mind, and effort. The documentary aired a few months later, My face was broadcast nationwide. Social media exploded with reaction stories of people who had faced similar struggles. Doubts and dismissals resonated deeply. Messages poured in from aspiring entrepreneurs, students, and professionals, thanking me for proving that determination and strategy could rewrite a life. And then, inevitably, Kevin watched it. I don't know if he intended to, or if curiosity drove him, but he saw it, all of it. My achievements, my impact, my recognition. He saw the hundreds of people whose lives I had influenced, and the thousands who admired my work. He saw the nobody he had once whispered about transformed into someone who commanded the room, the headline, and the respect of an entire city. I didn't contact him. I didn't need to. The story, my work, and my presence were more than enough. The validation came from the people whose opinions mattered, from the impact I had created, and from the knowledge that every word Kevin had spoken about me had been proven wrong by action, not argument. With the momentum of the documentary, I took the next step, establishing a foundation to support young entrepreneurs and professionals who faced systemic bias or social dismissal. The foundation provided mentorship, funding, and resources for individuals who, like me, had been underestimated. Every success story became part of a larger narrative, a living, breathing example that no one is defined by the doubts of others. Through this work, I also found personal fulfillment. The humiliation and heartbreak that once fueled my determination had transformed into a deeper purpose, lifting others, creating opportunity, and proving that resilience can be amplified when shared. Kevin's shadow became a distant memory. It no longer defined me. It was a footnote in a larger story of achievement, influence, and transformation. One evening, as I walked through the bustling offices of Catalyst Solutions, I reflected on the journey. Young professionals hustled around me, energized by purpose and guidance. Success stories lined the walls, photos and quotes, celebrating people who had been underestimated and had overcome. Every corner of the office spoke to perseverance, strategy, and the power of belief in oneself. And in that moment, I realized the ultimate truth. Triumph is not about silencing critics, proving detractors wrong, or seeking revenge. Triumph is about building something so meaningful, so undeniable, and so impactful that doubt becomes irrelevant. My story, Kevin's disbelief, and the years of relentless effort had all converged into a legacy, one that would endure far longer than any fleeting criticism. I sat down at my desk, opened an email, and saw a message from a young entrepreneur who had recently joined the mentorship program. It read, "I was told I'd never make it, that I wasn't enough. Your story gave me hope, and now I've launched my first business. Thank you for showing that it is possible." A smile spread across my face. That was the victory I had always sought, not headline, not recognition, not even Kevin's shock, but the knowledge that the journey I had endured could inspire and empower others. I leaned back in my chair and allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection. The boy who had been labeled a nobody, whose dignity had been questioned and whose potential had been mocked, had become a man who influenced countless lives. The whispers of the past were powerless now, replaced by the impact of action, determination, and resilience. And in the end, the lesson was simple. Do not measure yourself by the doubts of others. Build, strive, persist, transform. Because the best revenge, or rather, the best triumph, is not in retaliation, but in creating something so extraordinary that doubt and judgment fade into irrelevance. Kevin's words were a memory. My success, my influence, and my legacy were reality. The world had finally broadcast my face, my story, and my achievements. And in doing so, it had confirmed what I had always known. Nobody gets to define your worth but you. The nobody was gone. What remained was a force that could not be ignored. A man who had taken rejection, heartbreak, and disbelief, and forged from it a life of purpose, power, and undeniable impact. And that at last was triumph.